If your creative push has helped you, you can help out this show by shopping on Amazon. Just head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right to Amazon.com and you can do your shopping. It won't cost you anything extra, and a percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping to host your creative push. And especially with the holidays coming up, you can make a big difference just by buying the stuff that you were going to buy anyway. Again, the link is yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. And thank you so much for thinking about the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 317.
Just to be on stage in an arena, in an arena where I was looking out during sound check and seeing my seats in the stands where I had watched Guns N' Roses in one section and I had watched The Who in another section, I watched Pearl Jam in another section, just thinking all those times I'd always dreamed what would it be like to be on that stage, rocking out, doing cool rock star moves. And I was given the gift to actually find out and feel it.
Even in the darkness, even in the dead of night, even when the sun sets, even in the fading light, even when the clouds part, even when the lightning strikes, even when the storm starts, even when the time feels right. Remember when you said it was simple, remember when you said it was hard, remember when you said we were closer because we had come so far. Remember when you said it was easy, remember when you said it was tough, remember.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and you were just listening to the song Remember Now by Goodnight Sunrise. And my guest today is one of the co-founders of that band, David Kochberg. David is a musician and mechanical engineer who discovered a love for music and became a mostly self-taught guitarist, drummer, songwriter, and producer. And he comes on the show today to talk about how he got into music later in life and why he left his job in mechanical engineering to travel the world for 14 months. He talks about the perspective that you can achieve by experiencing the rest of the world rather than just reading about it. And he shares the story of coming back home to Toronto and the experience of making music more of a part of his life by joining a band. David also talks about what makes a successful and easy creative collaboration and maintaining a creative relationship despite romantic relationships maybe not working out. David also talks about how to make sense of those puzzle pieces that are floating around creative people's heads and the balance of a day job with his creative side hustle and building the confidence to tell other people that he's a musician before any other definition of himself. David also talks about the importance of putting yourself in the position to capitalize on luck, and one specific position that he put himself in by being able to open for Bon Jovi, and all about that experience. It's such a great story. And actually, this whole conversation was really fun, and also a look into what it takes to have the proper creative mindset, how to proudly wear your creative uniform, so to speak. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with David Kochberg. David, welcome to Your Creative Push, man.
Thank you, Youngman. It is bizarre to be here. Kind of a
bizarre,
surreal experience because I listen to the podcast all the time. So it's very meta to be part of it now from this perspective.
Yeah, you're part of the family now.
I'm in.
So it's always cool to have a listener on as well, and somebody who's very talented and part of something really cool. Goodnight Sunrises. I love your music. I love what you're doing, and you have some new stuff coming out too, which is really good. But before we get into kind of all that, I always like, as you know, to give my guests the opportunity to sort of give your kind of creative bio, sort of how you got to the spot that you're at now in your creative career.
Sure. So I feel like I'm still figuring all that out, but I guess that's the case for a lot of people. And also, I tend to be long-winded when telling stories, so I'll try to be concise. So I actually have come to music later in life than most people. So I am 37, and most of the bands that we're playing with right now are like mid-20s. But that's just sort of how it turned out. So I did like high school, then went to university, and then from university got a job. So I studied mechanical engineering, and for that stretch of my life just kind of followed the natural path of just like searching for a career. And I've always been kind of a more shy or introverted, quieter kind of person, but I've always been very curious, and I had a lot of creative outlets, but none that I really, I guess, took in a hugely serious way. And just, I guess, in my early 20s, as more time passed and as more of my friends started to do really interesting things with their lives, like volunteering somewhere across the world for a year or working in some interesting research project or doing a master's or something like that, I just kind of started to get kind of envious of all of these different adventures that everyone else was having. And I felt like I was the kind of person that wanted to have adventures, but I didn't really have them. And I wasn't sure how to go about it. So I was working in mechanical engineering out of university for a couple years, and I didn't hate it or anything, but I just didn't find it really fulfilling on an emotional level. I'd done like small amounts of traveling before, but I decided, at the advice of a close friend of mine who advocates very strongly for travel, I decided to take a year and just go traveling. And so I got a working holiday visa in Australia, which is pretty easy for a Canadian to do. And so then I just went to Australia and I backpacked for a few months, and I just like picked up odd jobs here and there along the way. And then I ended up going up, flew up to Singapore, and then traveled like north through Malaysia and Thailand, and then down through Laos and Cambodia, and spent like 4 or 5 months around that area, and then flew back to Australia for a few months. And so I ended up being away for 14 months altogether. And that was a completely transformative time in my life, because I'd never really challenged myself in that kind of way before, and I'd never done anything that crazy. So yeah, I could go on a lot about that, but...
And you legit quit your job for that?
Yeah. I had been getting kind of bored with it for a while, so I was thinking about doing something different, but I was just also a bit disenchanted with just like doing a regular office job.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And so I was just inspired by like all the other crazy things or not necessarily crazy, but to me, interesting things that other people seem to be doing with their lives. So yeah, I just wanted to see what else might be out there for me that I would find fulfilling.
Right. And sometimes whoever your friend is, bravo to them, because seeing the world, is important. And so often we go from high school to college to job, and then it's just straight path from then on. And then you kind of look for how you can save up money or save up time in order to see the world. But the world is so huge, and you can only usually see it in like bite-sized chunks. And it usually comes down to like, all right, let's go to like a resort and just stay on the resort and just hang out, as opposed to, seeing the world like you did.
Yeah, totally. And I as a person, I just love learning things, and that's always been the case. I've always been really inquisitive, and I find that like you can read a book about the history of Cambodia, for example. Like you can read about the killing fields and the genocide that happened there, and you'll definitely learn knowledge. But then to actually be in Cambodia and meet people who were directly affected by it by like one generation or even themselves, it just creates an emotional connection, and that learning experience is 100 times more powerful than just gaining a piece of knowledge, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, learning by doing, or learning by kind of immersing yourself in that kind of emotional connection that you get to things. That's what makes like change, and that's what gives inspiration.
Yeah, and to see how other cultures do things, like to see how life is lived in different parts of the world, and like different cultures that have centuries or millennia of just doing something differently, and that results in different priorities. And then also you just get like different, being able to travel like I did, and like a lot of North Americans and other, like people from Western countries can do is usually a position of privilege, because we often can visit a country that is pretty poor. But it was really interesting to just see that, like, the preconception I might have of what poverty means. Like, I could go and technically visit a rural community that is technically really poor, but everyone's really happy because they just have what they need, and they've got their family, and they have their community and life, and life is pretty great for them. So all of that stuff gave me a lot of perspective on my own values and on like Western values. And so it was a really weird shock to the system, I guess, to come back home to Toronto and just like the contrast of what priorities can often take over our lives and feel like those are most important. So yeah, that just overall having a lot of perspective on seeing that there's different ways to live your life. There's different ways to value things. There's different ways to find and define happiness. All of that kind of stuff. Those were all lessons that I learned just about the world when I was doing that huge trip. And then also in that trip, I learned a ton of lessons just about myself. And that was through some very active introspection. So I was journaling a lot while I was traveling, and I was asking myself all these questions, and I was setting goals for myself of things I wanted to get better at, like to learn how to just, like if I felt lonely because I was traveling by myself and my friends and family were all back at home, if I wanted to have some company or some friends, then I had to make them. So being a kind of more shy, introverted person, I had to just force myself to say hello to strangers. I mean, not total strangers, but like if I was checking into a hostel, like everyone's there for the same reason. Everyone wants to connect. And I think that all humans want to connect, but we all have our own complexes and insecurities. And a lot of times those are really just made up. So yeah, I mean, I still struggle with a lot of those things for sure, but I'm way, way, way better. And it's largely just from try to force myself to get better at it.
Right. So you spent this time traveling around, figuring out about yourself and kind of figuring out your place in the world, and then maybe coming home and home feeling a little bit different, or, having a new perspective on what you want to do. So take us there. Like when you get back to Toronto, what was your game plan from that point on, and where did you go?
Well, I arrived back home full of zest for life and optimism, and I just knew I had figured it all out, and that I was about to create a path for myself that was full of fulfillment and all that stuff. And I mean, I say this in a joking tone, not because I'm joking, but just because obviously that didn't pan out right away. But that is how I felt. Like I was ready to come home by that time, and I started having all these ideas of things that maybe I could do. Like maybe I could combine the creative stuff that I was into with the engineering training that I had. So the engineering work that I've done and that I still do is 3D CAD modeling, computer aided design. So it's just making 3D models of whatever it is that is being designed. So I was thinking maybe I could get into trying to learn how to do, like maybe start an animation company to do animations for companies that use these kind of models. So then I pursued that. But then another big pattern in my life is coming up with great ideas and then not really following up on them. So that's something that I constantly still really, really struggle with. And so that kind of plagued me for a few years, because I would just, and it still is the case. But I try to be more forgiving of myself about it. But yeah, so I had all these ideas. I just knew for sure that I wanted music to be a bigger part of my life, because when I arrived in Melbourne at the start of that trip, I had been like playing guitar for a few years on and off, but I wasn't very good. I definitely was not very confident. I ended up at a little market in Melbourne, and I found a classical guitar that didn't have any strings on it, and the person who was selling it had no idea where the guitar came from, if it worked when it had strings on it, no idea, but sold it to me for $10. And then
nice.
and then just at a few tables down, I was able to find a guitar case that was like falling apart, and they sold it to me for $5. So I spent $15 on a classical guitar with no strings and a broken case, and then spent that same amount on a pair of new strings and put it on, and it actually sounded pretty good. And then I spent the next year traveling around with that guitar. So that was also a hugely important part of the story, because just having that with me, that guitar literally was my travel companion physically, because I was hauling it around anywhere I went. But then also having it, I just played it every day. So playing it basically every day, and then also jamming with people that I would meet along the way, that gave me, over the course of that year, the confidence and a lot of the skills that I didn't have prior to that. And that was one of my goals, was to get better at being a musician. So then by the time that finished, I knew I still had a long way to go, but at least I felt confident that I had it in me to be a musician. And I also knew that I really loved it and wanted it to be a regular part of my life. So after I got back, in addition to the engineering things that I was thinking about doing, I also really wanted to join a band, because I hadn't been in an original band before. So this was back when Craigslist was still popular. I have no idea if anyone uses that now, but
yeah, they do.
Okay, great.
I've been using it looking for new jobs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Craigslist,
all right. Well, then, hey.
Still the Mac Daddy.
Okay. Good to know. So yeah, I think posted, because I also played drums too. So I just had posted looking for a band, and I ended up finding a band that I joined on drums. And then actually that's how I met my current bandmate, Vanessa, because she had just recently joined that band on vocals. So over the course of that was a couple brothers were the bassist and guitarist, and they were writing the music, but Vanessa started writing words and melodies more. And then I had also been doing some songwriting myself in the previous years. And so then we started working together more. And then when the band broke up, then Vanessa and I, but by that time we had taken over the band management and booking shows and running all the social media. And we were doing basically all of the running of the band. And then we were also working together more creatively, and we really loved doing that. So when that band broke up, we decided to start this band, Goodnight Sunrise. So that's like 7 years ago now. And so
what was the reason that that you guys, the first band, broke up?
Drama, band drama. Right. I would,
okay.
Without going too much.
We can gloss over that. Just continue. Yeah,
no, it's okay. I mean, there was some conflict with one of the other bandmates, and it had been. This happens to a lot of bands, and being in a band absolutely is like being in a relationship, but you're in a relationship with a bunch of people. So, yeah. So you are compatible in musical ways usually, because that's what draws you together in the first place. But very often you can clash emotionally or other ways. So,
sure.
So yeah, and that by the end of it, without going into details, like it was just clear that it was not gonna work anymore.
Yeah.
But Vanessa and I, we did feel that we had a really easy creative connection together. And so that carried forward to this new band that we started. And when we started this band, we did make it a very clear intent that it would be as drama-free as possible. And anyone that we were bringing into the band was just only there for the same reasons, and that it would be a band of respect and honesty and like talking things out and communicating as much as possible. So for the most part, we've been able to maintain that.
And what is it that makes a good like creative collaboration like you have with Vanessa? Like what is the ease by which you're kind of talking about, like that, it's just easy to work together? Like, is it just that you're like-minded, or that you are good at sharing ideas with each other or bouncing off of each other? Like what makes it an easy relationship?
It's all of those things for sure. We do have very similar outlooks on life. It's interesting because we are very, very different people in a lot of ways, but we are extremely similar people in a lot of ways. And the ways that we are extremely similar, I think those are the things that make it very easy for us to have kind of a baseline that we both share. So like we definitely have disagreements and arguments and get frustrated with each other. And I mean, that will happen daily, but for the most part, we really agree on a lot of core things. And especially having been working together for so long, we've just really developed that rapport and just really trust each other. So, but I guess in the early days when we were first developing that, like in that first band, when I had been writing some songs and in the past, and then Vanessa was working on lyrics for our band, and that was the first time she had really ever done that. And so I said, well, maybe I can make some suggestions. And we started working, and it just kind of flowed naturally. And so I guess there's not, like, there is an answer to your question, but there also isn't. It's just like an intangible, unquantifiable thing of like, why is it that you get along with someone that you've just met? Like, you just are kind of sharing this at the risk of sounding like cheesy, like you share the same energy, and right. It just sort of, it's just a connection. That was another cool thing over that big trip that I took. Was another interesting observation was about valuing who in your life you feel like a really out of the ordinary energetic connection with, and to just really cherish that and pay attention to it and value it, because there's only so many, like, everyone has lots of friends usually, but how many like best friends, quote, do you have? And by that I mean, how many people do you have in your life that actually the same friend who had really recommended a big trip for self-discovery to me, he had put it to me once that that there's kind of like two kinds of people in the world that you will interact with. You can interact with people who will just deplete your energy, or you can interact with people who will replenish your energy. And obviously there's like a whole spectrum from one to the other, but it's interesting to look at it that way, because you can think about the people who are in your life and think about what you give to each other. And if it's like a symbiotic relationship where whenever you hang out with them, you each kind of lift each other's spirits, that's a really special thing. And it's a really cool thing to be able to hold on to. And like, sometimes one of you is down and the other one is feeling up, and then that your friend can like lift you up a little bit and cheer you up, and sometimes vice versa. Whereas there might be other people in life who maybe don't have your best interests in mind and maybe are more demanding without giving so much back. So that was an interesting thing to reflect on, and to then just like really value even more the people in your life who you do have that really amazing connection with.
Yeah, just as you described that, it makes so much sense, and it's so true. I think so much of that has to do with like when you're talking with somebody and telling them your plans, or just telling them your interests, or whatever, or spilling your guts even to them, like who's actually like listening like intently and thinking about you, as opposed to the people that are kind of thinking about themselves, maybe like listening through you, people that can't wait to talk about what's going on in their life, you know what I mean? And I think so much of that has to do with, like I was asking you about with Vanessa, like, is it like a bouncing off thing? It's so true that those connections that you make with people, those best friends perhaps, those are the people that you both lift each other up. Like when you're down or when you're both up, you lift each other up higher. It's so kind of rare to find, but you're right, you have to like grab onto that and cherish that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for additional context, to be fully transparent, as this is public knowledge, we've talked about this before, but she and I actually dated for a few years in the middle of the band. So we had met in that first band, and then after that, we just both knew that we still wanted to keep making music and keep making music together. And so both of us approached it feeling like a lot of lack of confidence, like, can we actually write songs ourselves? And then we just started doing it. We tried it and we wrote a bunch of songs and thought, okay, I guess we can do it. So let's get a bassist and a drummer and let's make a band. So we did. And then after a couple years, we ended up starting to date, and then we were together for about 4 years. And then we broke up, I guess, like a year and a half ago. And so, I mean, that's been another layer to the history of the band that has certainly made things complicated at times. But I guess that speaks more than anything to what I was just saying about cherishing a special connection, because both of us have felt that way this whole time. Like, we both know that logically it is dumb for us to still be friends and still be in a band together. But the way that I look at it, at least, is that we went into the relationship just to see if maybe our special connection was more than just a really, really cool friendship. And it took a while for us to try that out. And, but then finally the answer was no, probably not. But that didn't mean that we weren't still possibly really great friends. And so it's that there's been it's been a bumpy ride for sure, as you would expect, but that was our commitment to holding on to this thing that we created together, this band that we really, really love. Like, it's become a really core part of my identity and a really important way that I express myself creatively, and she feels the same way. So we feel that way individually, and we can't do it without each other. Like, the band started with the two of us, and just by its very nature, the way that all of the music, everything around it only exists because of the two of us. And we haven't accomplished nearly all of the goals that we want to accomplish and that we really believe that we can accomplish. And so we just decided that we really were going to do everything that we possibly could to honor that really unique, like, one of a kind, creative and friend connection that we have with each other, in spite of that, like, crazy story that we've been through together.
Right, and congratulations to you. But was that hard at first? Because, as you're telling that story, like, it makes a lot of sense that when you have that collaborative connection with somebody, that it could be not necessarily misconstrued as, maybe something different or something more or something else. But it's like such a special connection. You're like, wow, we like really jive so well, like, creatively speaking. Why shouldn't we jive together in this way? But to hold the thing that you made creatively to like a higher degree, and to not let that thing fall by the wayside just because you don't work out in that respect, I think is like a noble thing. And it's like it was probably a difficult thing to do, like, at first, right?
And truthfully, it remains sometimes difficult still, but definitely we're much better with it, and we are friends, and we, having gone through all of it, we are learning to constantly to be better and better friends. So, like, the ways that we were not compatible as a couple, we've been able to learn from, so that we can be better as friends and better as business partners, and we can always keep, like, working towards like doing the work of the band more efficiently, and then also just having fun with each other and being friends.
Right.
But it was definitely very challenging at first. But yeah, something that comes out of that is that it has, I mean, not like explicitly or intentionally at all, but it has worked its way into our art, into our music a bit. And so, yeah, I think, well, I don't know if you were going to segue to it, but the song that we released, I guess, is a year ago. I think it was a year ago. It's called Remember Now. That had been, this makes sense because we had written that early 2017, I guess. And that just kind of came out of nowhere. Like, Vanessa had just started to write the words. She just started singing it, and a lot of the lyrics just came to her. She was just at a piano. And it was at a time when things were not great between us, and it was before we had broken up. And so we just that song like came together really quickly, a lot faster than a lot of other songs that we've written before. And it was just very natural, and it's sort of captured in a bit of an abstract way, but still in an emotional way, some of the stuff that we were going through. And so we kept working on that song, and then we ended up breaking up over the summer. And then it took us like a whole year to actually record the song, which we then released in November of that year. And it was interesting in so many ways, because the result of that, well, one result of that whole journey is this song that's one of our favorite that we have ever written, and it's our favorite, probably original song that we've recorded yet. And that song has brought us to the widest audience yet. And so that's another thing that I had wanted to note, that out of something that is not great can come something that is great. And so, yeah, I didn't phrase that very well, but...
No, I think we all know what you mean. And it's kind of one of the lessons that keeps coming up on the show is like how bad moments in your life can not usually, but oftentimes lead to a good moment, but it's like really hard to see in the moment. It's like you only like see it in hindsight. But one of the important things to do when you're going through maybe a bad time in your life, or a bad time kind of creatively, or trying to figure out what your next move is to try to keep creating if you can, because a lot of the times those emotions that you're feeling are kind of rare emotions that you only feel once or twice in your life, even if they are negative. So to try to like work them out, not only to bring something new that you can look back in hindsight and be like, okay, like I understand that now, like that was great that I was able to create that in that moment, but also like as you're in that moment to kind of work through it as like a form of therapy. Being creative is such kind of a special gift, because you do have that ability to work things out. For me, writing is the way that I figure out the world, and I'm sure musicians, like, you know, playing your guitar or being able to come up with words or lyrics or anything like that, it's like that's the way you've kind of get through those emotional times.
Yeah, absolutely. I have long felt that philosophy for sure. I feel like, well, so being an engineer and being really pattern minded, I guess, and I like to problem solve and fix and put like puzzles together and fix problems and stuff like that. I've recently started to think about like what music means to me, I guess, and why I enjoy it creatively. And I have a hypothesis that making music or doing really anything creative, I think, is a really cool way that we can create structure. And so the world is just pure chaos, and like increasingly so every day. And I think that playing music or painting or writing or whatever engages that, like, that flow part of the brain that expresses creativity, to me, I look at it as like, I'm just like, maybe I'm making this up right now, but like picturing, like, if you just look up in the air and you just see like all of these little puzzle pieces floating around the room, and then you're just like grabbing random puzzle pieces and putting them together right in front of you, and all of a sudden you've got a clear picture, when before it was just like a chaotic sea of puzzle pieces. So I feel like playing music, definitely the physical act of like playing music, especially with other people, that is like such an easy way to get lost and to like forget about your conscious thoughts. And I think that the physical engagement of that process sort of enhances that. But even if I'm just at home just playing guitar by myself and I'm like trying to come up with a riff and I don't totally have it, but I feel like I've got something there, and then I just keep trying different things, and then all of a sudden I'll get it. It's just like assembling a puzzle that I just made up, I guess. But having assembled it just feels like a really cool accomplishment, and it feels like I've just made a little bit more sense of the world. So that's like a metaphorical way to look at it. But then also in terms of writing, like in terms of lyrics or just writing like you do, that's another level to then actually make sense of the thoughts that are associated with your world.
Right. I really love that analogy of like the puzzle pieces kind of floating around your head. And I think, you know, most humans can relate to that, like the idea of all these worries or or things that you haven't figured out yet that are kind of floating around your head, and it can kind of sometimes be overwhelming. So to be able to put them down, whatever down is for you, like, and creating something out of it and piecing it together, not only can you like piece it together and create something, you know, beautiful or something that makes sense to you, but there's also like a few less pieces floating around and it kind of clears up your headspace once you're able to grab it out of the universe, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You just do a little bit of existential spring cleaning.
Yeah, I love that. Well, kind of going back to the like the whole engineering thing. So you were also working as an engineer during this time, like while the band was going on. Is that right?
Yeah. So I still do, actually. So that's technically my day job, and I've been very fortunate that the company that when I got back from that trip to Australia, there was a company that I had been working with prior to my trip through my old job. And so when I got back, I ended up doing some freelance, like a couple weeks here and there. And I've been able to just stay freelancing with them for years, and they know my deal and I know their deal, and I help them out whenever I'm free, and if there's anything like really pressing and urgent, then I'll make time to make sure that it gets done. But usually, like, for example, this summer, we were on tour for a lot of it. We were playing out of town basically every weekend, and there was a few weeks stretch where we were away totally. And because I'm just freelance, I just set my own hours, and so I don't have to like get vacation cleared. I can just go away. Now I won't get paid for it, but I can work the rest of the time to bank up for it. So it gives me a lot of flexibility that has really helped, because I can work at that job, save up, then throw all of my money into the band, which is basically what I do. But the other side of it is that being an engineer and also just having years of like professional quotes industry experience has also just given me a lot of business perspective. And so Vanessa and I, so we co-manage the band. We're the two like main permanent members. And we have more and more over the years tried to look at the band more and more as a business. And there's definitely, I want to say, is it Maria?
Brophy?
Brophy, yeah. So I feel that listening to that episode was really helpful with that kind of stuff too, because I think her perspective on just like running your art as a business is so helpful. And I know that a lot of artists don't really think that way just because we don't have the training so much. And even me having a lot of industry or professional career experience, I keep doing air quotes that nobody can see. Even me having those kinds of things, still it takes a while for me to actually apply that thinking to being in a band, because you think of being in a band as just like, oh, it's fun, I'm in a band and I'm going and I'm rocking out and everything's fun and blah, blah, blah. But then the more we want to take it seriously, the more I realize we also have to take it seriously professionally in a lot of ways. So that's a lot of the business stuff is stuff that I have been really working on behind the scenes to formalize things a lot more. And so we still, as a small business, are not yet profitable, but we made way more this year than we did last year. And so hopefully that will just continue to be the case. And so that comes with also the thinking of all the money that we spend on the band as being a business investment. Just like any small business, like if you open a coffee shop, then you've got to buy furniture and you've got to get an espresso maker. You've got to get all of the overhead and all that stuff. Those are all business expenses, and your business is not going to be profitable at first. But if you invest wisely and you think about all that stuff, then over time your business can be profitable. And so we've just started to look at the band that way more and more. And that doesn't mean that we're any less creative or artistic. It's just hopefully that will set us up to be able to just constantly be more and more artistic.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I still balance both, but hopefully our goal is we want to be able to do the band full time. Like that's our dream, is to be able to just spend all day working on the band, like doing the management stuff, or hopefully someday we can hire people to do those kinds of admin things, and we can just be practicing and writing and like learning new instruments and all this stuff.
Right. Now, we were talking a little bit before, like via email and stuff like that, and you had mentioned the idea of kind of self-confidence and being able to define yourself as a musician and an engineer, as opposed to an engineer that just does music on the side. Was it like the realization that, okay, this is a business as well, that gave you that kind of confidence, or was it something else?
It was that, and it was just a few things. It was kind of by force of will, just trying to make myself say that more often. So, there's a few things all kind of tied into one. So there was just an inherent lack of confidence, which is a character trait that I have been trying to work on throughout my life. And so over the years, like in the first few years of the band, I wouldn't even tell people I was a musician because I didn't really think that I was a musician. Like, just because I played guitar in a band, I wasn't that good, like, compared to the bands that I look up to. Even, I mean, sure, they're like big bands that are famous that I really love, but even like local bands that we were playing with or that I really admired, compared to them even, I wouldn't really consider myself a musician. And that I just came to realize was a way of putting myself down and holding myself back because, yeah, I was a musician. I played, even though it wasn't as good as I wanted to be, I still played guitar in a band and I was a musician. So I should just start saying that. And it didn't mean that it would have to be in like a bragging way or anything like that. Just it's factual. So that's part of it, is the confidence. And then really, really tied into that is something that I think every one of your guests talks about, and as you as well, is the imposter syndrome. So that's basically the same thing. So I think the imposter syndrome just totally is wrapped up with one's self-confidence. So just constantly working on that. And I still am working on that again, but I'm definitely way better. And so that's part of it just from the musician side. And then the idea of like, what am I? So whenever you meet someone new, then obviously an initial conversation starter, which is natural, is what do you do with your life? And usually that means, what is your job? So I would always say I'm an engineer because that's the job that I do that pays me. And thinking of being in a band is more of like a side project. But the more I thought about it, I identify so strongly with being in a band, and it's such an important thing to me, an important part of my life, that I'm not just an engineer, and I don't want to like renounce being an engineer because that is also part of myself that I value and I really do enjoy in terms of, yeah. So I just tried to keep like working the music part into that answer more and more, little bit by bit. So I would answer more like, well, I'm an engineer, but I also play in a band. Or like, my day job is as an engineer, but by night I am a musician. And so like slowly but surely started to, and now I'm like the last little while I've been trying to flip them around. So now if someone asks me what I do, I'd say, well, I'm a musician. I play in a band, and then I'm also an engineer. And I don't know, it's still like a work in progress because it's a struggle just to find that self-confidence to like say, I guess, what you really think of yourself without thinking about like what the other person is going to think or thinking what the right thing that you should say is. So yeah, that's all of those things. It's a work in progress, but yeah, as I told you when I first reached out to you, that's something that I've made a lot of progress in, and it's just by identifying it and realizing it's something that I wanted to work on because I want to be honest with other people and I want to be honest with myself. And if music is really that important to me, then I should say so. Right.
It's something I still struggle with is, telling people, even at work, that I have a podcast. I have this like whole like second life
yeah.
where I'm doing something that's very important to me. Yet I think when you put yourself out there like that, you feel like you have to either defend yourself or you have to explain it further, or it's almost like you don't want to have to like go to trial for for what you do in your spare time, and whether it makes money or not, or like all these inevitable questions that are going to follow up. But it's like really also important to kind of embrace that so that you can more easily step into that role, so you are more comfortable talking about it, and so that other opportunities maybe can come up whenever you do meet that right person.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the important thing is that all that stuff that you just said, that's not our fault, but we, I guess, are the ones that have to struggle with it, because it is natural for, if you tell someone that you're an artist and that's like how you define yourself, or if that's the career you do, it is natural for people to react to that with some judgment and to maybe have some doubt or skepticism. So for us, having that trepidation at actually answering that way, there is a reason for it, and it's not our fault. It's because society isn't really used to that kind of thing being normal. So I think that that's another thing to keep in mind for you and me, and for your listeners, for everyone who wants to do something creative with their life in whatever form that means, that we have to. Yeah, and as so many of your guests say this, you have to do it for yourself first and foremost. And I think we just have to accept and know that not everyone's going to get it. A lot of people aren't going to get it in terms of like how they assess what we're doing with our lives. And just because other people don't really get it doesn't mean that we've made the wrong decision. So you really do have to trust yourself, but it is hard to do. And so even just recognizing that is hard, and then that's okay, I think is kind of helpful, because it's a little bit freeing, because then that can build up your own self-confidence if you just learn to trust yourself more.
Yeah, and so much of that has to do with this feeling of, which we also kind of talked about before, of, quote, I'm doing the air quotes now, of making it. And like, I think for, writers, like, you haven't made it until you have a publisher that published your book and you're on the bookshelf, or for a musician, like getting picked up, like getting a record deal or whatever, like fill in the blank, this like fake thing that we all kind of develop in our heads of this far off thing of making it, with other people telling us that, okay, now you're this thing. And that's why we have such a difficult time defining ourselves that way, or putting ourselves out that way. And it's so wrong, and it's it's like so backwards, because all you have to do is do the thing, and celebrate those kind of wins along the way as you climb the ladder of the place that you want to get to. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, learning how to keep perspective on everything is really challenging. And yeah, learning how to quantify or measure success, like what your own definition of that is, what other people's definition, how it all matches up, is really so hard. And we're constantly struggling. So yeah, I was telling you that we just today, we released a new single, and just like with past releases, it's so hard to balance all of the emotions around it, because we like obviously want tons of people to listen to it, and we want it to become like huge and extremely successful. And that if those things happen, then that is so validating, and that's what we always crave as artists. But chances are that's not going to happen, and we have to be okay with that if it isn't the case. So if the song doesn't get tons and tons of spins, then that has to just be okay. And with every new thing we put out there, it does become more and more okay. And I put less and less expectations onto everything we do. But that doesn't mean that there's no expectations. It still is hard. And that's just natural. It's human nature. Like we want validation, and we want people to tell us that we're awesome. But yeah, I think just more and more over time, I have tried to develop that balance of wanting that validation, because that's okay, and it's okay to be driven by that a bit, but you also have to be driven by making something you're proud of. And so I know that even if like there's no more response beyond what the like people have responded, they really like the song, and it just came out, and it's so easy to be impatient too. But like, even if nothing more comes from it, then today then I at least know that I am totally satisfied with this piece of art that we made, and I really, really love it, and I'm glad that I made it. So that's an important foundation that every project should be based on, but that's kind of like a muscle that has to be built up over time. And like, we've released a couple albums ourselves and a bunch of singles over the years, so we've had a lot of time to get used to like things not being received the way that we hoped that they might be. And I've also learned not to take it personally necessarily, and that maybe it really just means that something we've done just isn't that good, and that's not the end of the world. Maybe because there's that other thing that again comes up so often on your podcast, is just that idea that when you start out, this is like a cliche, when you start out doing something creative, your goal is to be as good as like one of the people that inspired you to do it. But you're not going to do that right away. It's not possible. And so you get discouraged so easily. So I've definitely really taken that advice to heart over the last few years. And I'm just trying to focus on, just with everything we do, just keep getting better and better, and focus on that, and focus on always trying to put out something I'm really proud of. And then whenever there is feedback, even if it's like not as good as I wanted, then just to take that as an opportunity to learn more, and to learn more about maybe what wasn't working, so that the next project, maybe that one will work.
Right. That's all you can do is put something out that you personally are proud of. And, you know, people don't like to talk about luck or fate or whatever, but like so much of, you know, what happens to wildly successful people is often like a lucky break. But the thing that's consistent is that they were putting out good work. They were putting out stuff that resonated with them. Maybe it was their first thing and they got super lucky, or maybe it was, 20 years later. So much of it has to do with, putting your fate into other people's hands, putting the best possible thing that you can out there and just seeing where it falls. Do you know The Price is Right, that show?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, Plinko?
Classic. Oh, yes, that's the best game on there.
I always think of it like Plinko, like you just get as many chips as you can, and those chips are like the things that you've created, and then you just kind of just like let it drop and see see where it goes, see how, if people like it, perhaps you have like a square peg or something that you put down, and that's like just a bad song or a bad piece or whatever, and you learn from those mistakes. But all you can do is just keep putting out your best thing, and hopefully you land the grand prize, whatever that is.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And the more chips that you throw in there, the better chance you got.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I think I've always thought of luck as being something that you put yourself in the position for. So for sure, there's many examples of like luck striking someone for just no apparent reason. But over time, like looking in the grand scheme of things, I think in general, luck is something that doesn't just strike randomly. Like if you set yourself up for luck to strike you, then if luck does strike, then you will actually be able to make the most of it. So like in any business, in any venture, if you're just kind of coasting through and thinking, well, I'm just going to like do whatever, and someday maybe like luck will strike me and something cool will happen, then maybe it will, but probably not. And if it does, it's probably not going to like do that much to your life. But if you're working hard constantly on getting better and better, and you have goals in mind, then if you have that focus and you put yourself in that position, then if luck does strike you, it's really going to hit. And that's when you can actually make use of it. So I think, yeah, luck on its own is like a nice concept, but I think there's so much more depth to it. And just the sum of one's experiences and personal work is what prepares you for luck.
Right. You got to be prepared for it, and just got to, I think Stephen Pressfield talks about just, being ready for the muse. Like you have to be there working when the muse shows up, because the muse can just show up and go away, but it's also, opportunities, luck and opportunities. Like if somebody offers you some gig that you are completely not prepared for because you haven't been putting in the hard work. You don't even have like a full set list or whatever. That's just a completely squandered opportunity because you weren't in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is totally related to one of the other things that I had told you in my first email. I don't know if you were going to ask about that, but
yeah, it's gonna be my next question.
Okay, well there you go. So then I'll let you segue.
Well, yeah. Tell me about Bon Jovi.
Okay. Well, first of all, we are on a first name basis with our new good friend John.
Oh shit! Nice.
As we met him very briefly before the show.
Oh, cool.
This is the best possible example of putting yourself in the position for luck to strike. So that song, Remember Now, we had made a music video for it, and I saw that. So apparently Bon Jovi for like over a decade has been doing this where every show that they play, they will get a local band to open. So they don't tour with an opening band. And this is just the coolest thing. I don't think there's really any other bands of that scale that do this. And so they partner with local radio stations or promoters in every city that they're touring. And so I just randomly saw that our classic rock station in Toronto was holding this contest to find an opening band for Bon Jovi, and I didn't think that much of it. And then I thought, well, whatever. So I'll just submit us. And so this is part of an overall philosophy that I've very much gotten from Vanessa, my bandmate, which is something that she said a ton over the years and has really sunk in, which is that you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. And so this is exactly like your Plinko analogy too.
I like hers better.
Yeah. But Plinko is more fun. It's more active.
That's true.
But anyways, so yeah, there's so many times where, I mean, it could be entering something, but it could even just be like choosing whether or not to do something, where you can just like talk yourself out of something. And especially as a creative, you can think, oh, well, I'm not good enough, or there's no chance that I'll get that. But over the years, we've been very ambitious, and we have tons of failures, endlessly, infinite failures. But we also have had a lot of great successes, and a lot of those successes have been things that were just a shot in the dark. That we just thought, you know what, why not? Let's just try. Let's ask if we can open for that band. And we're like, there's no chance that we can open for that band. And then we find out, actually, yeah, we can. And it's like, oh, well, if we hadn't asked, we wouldn't have done it. So I just saw this contest and I thought, I'll just submit it. And so I just had to submit that video, one video, and that was it. And then I kind of forgot about it because I thought there's no chance. And then I get a call from the radio station earlier that week saying that we had been chosen as one of the 5 finalists. And then that those 5 finalists were sent to Bon Jovi's team and management to approve. Then those were sent back to the radio station, and the station staff was allowed to choose the winner from the 5 finalists. So like the station was just as like starstruck and dumbfounded as we were that they were involved in this too. 'Cause it was just so cool for the band to get the local community involved like that. And so the staff at the station just chose us. They liked our song the best. They liked us the best. And I got a call, and we spent the next, we only found out 3 days before the show. So we spent the next 3 days, going absolutely crazy, not sleeping. We were total nut jobs, just trying to figure out, all the things that we had to do in order to pull this off. And so, yeah, if any of the listeners want to scroll through, this was back in May, so you can look through on Instagram and Facebook to see some of the videos of us finding out and chat and leading up to the show, and then some of the behind the scenes from the show. And then after, I think we did a Facebook Live that you can watch if you want to find out what the experience was like. So, so all that to say that we wouldn't have gotten picked if I hadn't entered. And so that idea, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. We were totally, that's 100% luck that we were picked, but it's not 100% luck. You can look at it as luck, but it's also, we had been working for 7 years as a band, building ourselves up. And this was an opportunity that we took as like such an incredible reward for all that hard work, and an opportunity for us to show why we were deserving and why we had really believed in ourselves for so long. And so just as you were saying, yeah, like all that work that you put in, then we were able to confidently take that stage and play well. And we're really proud of how we performed, and we were able to, yeah. And I mean, I could talk for hours about what the experience was like, but just to like be on stage in an arena, in an arena where I was like looking out during sound check and seeing my seats in the stands where I had watched like Guns N' Roses in one section, and I had watched The Who in another section, I watched Pearl Jam in another section, just thinking all those times I'd always dreamed like, what would it be like to be on that stage, rocking out, doing cool rock star moves? And I was given the gift to actually find out and feel it. So it's something that I and we will just treasure forever. And it was more reward than I could ever have imagined or asked for all of the work that we've put in towards our goals and our dreams. And it was so much encouragement. And again, this also ties into the struggles or the challenges in keeping our band together. What more motivation could we have that we were on the right track and that we should keep working at this band than that experience? So, yeah.
Right. So much motivation, and also, I think, a preview of, things to come, more shows like that.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully. And like with as much like realism and humility as possible, like right. For sure, that is someday what we want to be able to do. Like, that's not going to happen again anytime soon, probably, but hey, you never know. It's kind of a running joke now. Like, anytime some crazy opportunity happens or we think of some idea, like, who should we contact? And then anytime I think like that's impossible, then I always just think, well, we did open for Bon Jovi, and that's technically impossible. So maybe anything's really possible. Who knows? So anything's worth a shot.
Well, also just doing that once, it's a resume builder, like, so to speak. Not only like can it give you the confidence, okay, like I did this thing, this crazy thing, which gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like, I couldn't imagine standing in front of that many people, regardless of how confident I was in the music or whatever. But also for future opportunities, you literally get to say that you did that because you did that, and it can open the door for many more opportunities because now, yes, you've handled that pressure, you've stood on that big of a stage before. It opens up so many more worlds of possibilities, not just for people letting you do it, but for you having the confidence to try it again.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, a lot of people were asking after, and still ask now, like, what came from it? Did anything like big change, or like, do we notice any big difference? And it wasn't like we got off stage and like John Bon Jovi offered us a record deal or something. But after that show, exactly what you're saying, just like the overall kind of street cred and the resume building aspect of it, just to say that we've done it. And we got some awesome footage, whichever anyone can check out. If you look on our YouTube or our Facebook, the song is, so we ended up doing basically a second music video for our song Remember Now, because we played it there and we brought a couple videographers with us, and they were like on stage and they caught some incredible footage. And so then they ended up just cutting that to us playing Remember Now, because we did that live for that show. So yeah, you can search that and you can see what it was like for us. But so to have that footage to be able to show to other promoters and other show bookers and other people in the industry, for sure, that's like, from a business perspective, a huge tool for us going forward. And just over the summer, or like when we were touring across Canada, and we were trying to reach out to like local publicity outlets and to spread the word about coming to town, that was such a huge selling point to them. Like, there were a lot of articles in some smaller towns, like, band that opened for Bon Jovi is coming to town playing X date. So it definitely raised our profile in a lot of different ways. And all of those things are really, that they're all just cumulative little successes that keep building the band's overall success further and further.
Absolutely. And we'll link up that music video in today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/goodnightsunrise. David, I've been keeping you for a long time here, so I will ask you for one more thing, which you probably know what it is. And it's the final push, where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay, this is just such a weird experience because I've heard so many great people do this directly to me. So it's like I'm looking at a microphone right now, and I feel like I'm actually reaching and grabbing my own shoulders as well, which is very weird. So but actually, yes, again, because I do constantly need to be re-encouraging myself. But yeah, okay. So there's a bunch of just general pieces of advice, which is just not to be fearful of failures, to embrace them and learn from them, and just always to be inquisitive and to always be learning and look at every opportunity that comes your way as a chance to try something out and to learn from it, and just to overall just be curious. But then the full-on final push, which I gave away a few minutes ago, is that concept that we've really tried to take to heart as a band, and that I've tried to take to heart as a person, which is that you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. And that doesn't mean that I am advocating for gambling, but so I should get if you can link a waiver in the show notes as well for people to fill out. But yeah, if there's something out there that you really want, or if an opportunity comes your way and you are interested in it, don't be afraid to just try for it. And you got to be realistic, and you have to have put in the work to prepare yourself for whatever it is. I mean, if I'm talking about that Bon Jovi thing, that's a specific example, but it can be anything at all. Anything that you dream of or strive for and you've been working towards, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and don't let fear of failure be the reason that you don't take a chance. Because if you don't take that chance, if you don't buy that ticket, someone else is going to buy that ticket and they're going to win that lottery. So you might as well just give it a shot, because there's really not that much to lose. So yeah, I think that's the best piece of advice that I can offer.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just giving that opportunity to, in your case, you're literally giving that opportunity to somebody else. And when those kinds of opportunities like yours come up, you imagine that it's millions of people vying for this one spot. But in reality, this isn't to diminish your accomplishment by winning that contest, but it's not a million people trying to. It's not the entire world trying to. It's there might be hundreds of people trying. But really a select few of them have put in the time like you did. You realize that you've put in the time, you have more experience than other people, and that you are a good fit and you do deserve it. So why literally give that to somebody else by not just putting your name in the hat, Yeah, exactly. It's confidence and self-confidence are a lot more within our own control than I think we realize. And especially creative people, I think, have a tendency to be a bit more timid maybe in being self-confident. And I just think that comes from just the natural, I think, I don't know, this could be going off to a tangent, but creative people, I think, are very empathic and I think of others a lot. So that doesn't really mesh that well with self-confidence, because self-confidence in its pure form is just, I guess it's just more ego. And so you can have ego in a bad way and you can have ego in a good way. And so I think it's important to see the difference, and don't resist developing self-confidence because you're worried about developing an ego. I think it's important for you to strengthen the ego, the humble form of the ego, that strengthening the humility and that humble form of the ego that develops a positive form of self-confidence is so important for anyone, but especially for a creative, because that's how you ultimately can make sure that you are satisfied with whatever it is that you're making.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree, and it's one of the hardest things to kind of muster up that confidence to, kind of like we were talking about before, to even call yourself, an artist or a musician or writer or whatever. It's so hard to do that for creative people, but it's also so important because that's the way that you continue to flourish and continue to get new opportunities and to develop yourself into new opportunities and new avenues. So it's tough, but the way that you get it is by celebrating those wins along the way and not like having that goalpost in the future. It's good to have goalposts in the future, but not having that goalpost saying I made it, because there never is a making it. So you gotta see that you're making it every single day just by making stuff, by creating and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, totally. And I guess to show one last example of the opposite end of the spectrum, like that Bon Jovi thing was insane and crazy and like once in a lifetime. But then also I just applied that thinking to reaching out to you because, as I had told you when I've been listening to this podcast for a while, and for like a while I thought, it'd be cool to be a guest on it someday. Like I feel like maybe I would be a good fit for it, but it's the same kind of self-confidence thing, or like do I tell people I'm a musician, that kind of thing. Like I would for so long think, well, I'm not at that point where it makes sense for me to like talk about this stuff because I haven't made it. But that's not true, and it doesn't necessarily mean one thing. And all of your guests come from such a range. Like you have people who are just at the very start of pursuing their creative passion as a full-time thing and are just trying to find their feet. You've got people who've been established in their profession as an artist for a couple decades, and it covers the whole range. And I think no matter what, even those people in each of those spots, even they are still on a journey, because we're always on a journey. And whenever you reach a goal, then chances are you're going to be satisfied with it for about 30 seconds. And then you're going to look ahead and there's going to be another goal that you wish you have. So we're always just reaching forward. And so, yeah, I just thought I might as well just reach out. So that's another example of you can't win the lottery unless you buy a ticket. In this case, you can't be on a podcast unless you write an email to the host of the podcast.
Exactly.
And you happen to respond to the email and think that we could have a good chat. And I really appreciate it. I had a blast.
Absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate it too, because one of the most requested guests from listeners is guests that aren't as far in their creative career. Usually it's hard to get creative people to come on a podcast to talk about this stuff because it's so, as we talked about before, like creative people are often introverts and don't want to talk about this kind of ugly stuff and or don't want to appear as an expert. And it's easier to get people that have had some sort of success or a lot of followers or are consistently making money or have made money for years and kind of had their feet under them. And it's much harder to get guests that are earlier in the path. And I always think it's so brave when people come on that aren't, at a certain point. That's not to say that any previous guest hasn't, quote, made it yet. Because I think, like I said, all people that are, actively creating have made it and you're in the process of making it. But I always appreciate the bravery from people who haven't quite reached that sort of pinnacle. So I appreciate you reaching out to me to come on the show. And for anybody else that's interested in and thinks that they have something to share or thinks that they have a creative message to share with the community, I'm always open. Youngman@yourcreativepush.com.
Someone out there, go buy a metaphorical lottery ticket.
Yes. Go buy it. Dude, David, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your journey and your music with us. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. Yeah, I really enjoyed chatting with you. Again, it was such a surreal experience, but it'll be cool to see my name pop up in the feed. And thanks for the support. Yeah.
Of course. Absolutely, man. And for everybody listening, you can find more music from David and Vanessa and Goodnight Sunrise at goodnightsunrise.com, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. They are GNSR Band, and we'll have all of that linked up along with the music video and everything else at yourcreativepush.com/goodnightsunrise.
I'll also note one thing is that this is just a headache that we brought on ourselves, but our band Goodnight, Sunrise, and so all of our music is like Spotify and Apple Music and whatever streaming or download services you use. But if you search for us, make sure you put the comma in there, because there was an old band called Goodnight Sunrise that is no longer active, but we still kind of get mixed up with. But so we do have, I don't know when this is airing, but whenever it is airing, our new single is out now. So you should have a listen, and we'd love to hear what you think of it. And you can follow us on those streaming service things as well.
Excellent. Yeah, for people searching, make sure you put the comma in, but we'll also link up iTunes, Spotify, Bandcamp, all the places.
Perfect.
Again, at the show notes page.
All the millions of overwhelming places that there are.
Right? Too many?
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right, David, thanks again, man.
Thank you, Youngman.
Thank you once again to David for coming on the show. And just to let you all know, we are going to be talking with Vanessa, his bandmate that he talked about in the episode. I already spoke to her for a little while after talking with David, and she agreed to come on the show. So that will be coming for you early 2019. But something that I wanted to talk about from this episode, something that I kind of completely glossed over, but I made some notes that I wanted to talk about it, but we never got to it, was that story of him buying that guitar when he was traveling and carrying it around. And I think that's such a key element to his story, and something that I want you to think about, how you can buy your, quote, guitar and carry it around with you. Do that with whatever your thing is, whether it's a camera or a sketchbook or a laptop or a musical instrument or whatever. Buy that thing and carry it around with you. Not only does this thing allow you to start conversations with people, maybe people that are on their own creative journey or people that can make connections for you because you are proudly wearing this thing and showing off to the world that you are a creative person that's actively pursuing their dreams. But it's also always on your mind. It's always with you, so that when you do have those microseconds, those micro minutes to get to your creative passion, to sketch something down, to practice your craft, whatever it may be, you already have the thing with you, and all it takes is just whipping it out and getting to work. And all of those points aside, if you are carrying it around with you at all times, it's almost physically a part of you, an appendage even. We talk about that on the show all the time, how you don't want to just have a creative morning or a creative evening after you get home from work or a creative lunchtime. You want to live a creative life. And by having your creative tools with you or having your creative totem with you at all times, it's a part of you. So think about what you can do, what you can add to your kind of creative wardrobe, some way that you can prove to yourself and to the world that you're actively on this creative journey. Next week is Christmas Eve, and I am taking that week off, but I have already edited all of the episodes through the rest of December and January, and there are some good episodes coming up, I promise you. But I wanted to prepare myself for Cramuary. There will probably be some content coming out about that to remind you to start thinking about what you want to do for Cramuary if you are interested in that. I'm very excited to talk about what I'm going to be up to, but I just wanted to give you that warning that next week is a week off, but I do have a best of episode that will knock your socks off if you hadn't heard it before. And then again, some amazing episodes coming up. But as for today, that's all I've got for you. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your creative work done. So go and get it done. And we will be here for you in 2 weeks if you need that push again. We're going to leave you with some more music from Goodnight Sunrise. This is a song for a winter's night to lead you into the holiday season. I love you all so much. Go get some amazing work done, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
The snow is softly falling. The air is still in the silence of my room. I hear your voice softly calling. If I could only have you near to breathe
Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.